Welcome to another episode of Fair Folk at Work. You know, there were a lot of different communities at Fair, and one of them was the craftspeople. It was a place for craftspeople to gather and people to buy their work, and it was a place for craftspeople to, well, find other people to explore other things. My guest today started with stained glass, had a slight detour through the children's glade, and then ended up as a pirate. My guest today is Marshall Bryer. Marshall, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
But before we get to your tortured occupational path through the fair, you get the first Fair Folk at Work question, which is, who was the person to say to you there was a thing called fair, and what did they say to get you out there?
Well, that would be my sister. My sister approached me and said, "Hey, her and her husband were doing a stained glass booth at the Renaissance Fair, and do I want to come help out?" And I said, "Sure." And they told me a little bit about it. I didn't know much about it at the time, but I knew that all the costumes had to be in period, and that everything had to be like the Renaissance, and they were going to pack up a bunch of stained glass and haul it out to the fair site.
Can I
Um,
ask how old you were?
I was about 18 at the time.
Okay. Did you have any previous theatrical experience?
I took acting and I did The Odd Couple, but that's about the extent of my theatrical experience, really not much. But I had some sales experience and it sounded like fun. And so I went with them out to the site and we set up the booth. And my sister and brother-in-law had a big stained glass shop on Melrose by the Improv and Fred Siegel's, which they did a lot of the movie stars and rock stars at the time. People like Joni Mitchell and Charles Bronson and people like that would come in their studio. And so my brother-in-law decided it'd be fun to do the fair. So we packed up this beautiful Renaissance window, which had three muses coming down these stairs in kind of a Greek type setting with a stream and everything. And the window must have been, I don't know, 15 feet by maybe 15 feet. It was a huge thing, and it was 15 panels, and each panel was like 4 feet by 4 feet.
And you
And
took that to the fair?
we took that to the fair. It was a whole wall. There's pictures of it. It was very impressive. And it was valued at the time of over $100,000. And that was back in the 70s. I don't know what it's worth today. But we had a beautiful booth and it was right across from the main stage. And we were right next door to a guy named Stephen Coria. At the time, no one knew who he was, but he later became pretty famous in the stained glass business. And
Can I
actually,
ask a couple questions?
not stained glass, he blown glass. He did blown glass, art glass. But go on.
Did you come from a family of glass workers, or was this your sister just an offshoot of the family that had an arts and crafts bent?
My sister was an artist and she was written up when she was 7 years old in the LA Times. And then when she was 16 years old, she had a one-woman show on Beverly Drive in Beverly Hills. And some of her collectors were Paul Newman and John Wayne and people like that. And that was when she was 16. She later went on to start doing painting and stained glass. She was in her early 20s. I also have another famous artist in my family named Man Ray, who was pretty famous. You can look him up. So art does run in my family.
And what did your parents do?
Well, my mother used to draw for Disney way back when.
Really?
Yeah. And then she later went into real estate. My father was a pharmacist. So anyway, my sister loved antiques and she started with an antique shop. And
Okay.
when they started with the antiques, they wound up buying a lot of stained glass. And then they converted the antiques into a stained glass shop. That's how that got started. Anyway, we took the windows out there, we set up the booth, and it was a lot of fun. And I loved the fair, from the first day on. The next year, they didn't want to really do it, so I volunteered to run the booth. So in '72, we brought a beautiful. We weren't going to bring that window up again. That was too much work, and there was too much breakage on going up and down the road. So the next year, we brought this beautiful stained glass dome and it had the sun and the moon and the zodiac in the center and all the planets. It's like Saturn, and it was the dome was about, I'd say, maybe 10 feet by maybe 5 feet. Anyway, that was our second year at the fair, and then after that, they really didn't want to do it again because of the breakage problem coming up and down the dirt roads. And so I still wanted to continue with the fair, so I went out working for the Children's Dell for a year, which was, kind of interesting, but it really wasn't my thing.
And you were
And
about 20 years old at this time?
yeah, but one thing I will add about when you are a boothie at the fair, they call us boothies. Everything you do at that time, we had to all be in costume. Everything had to be in period. Everything had to be something that would have been there in that time period. So you had to, whatever you're selling at the fair had to go before a panel, and they had to look at what you're selling. And it had to be something that was made by you. The artist had to be there. It couldn't be something that's imported from somewhere else. It had to be made by you or made, that you made. And second of all, it had to be in period, something that would have been in existence during that time period. And they were very strict about this. So all the crafts at that time were pretty amazing. And usually the person that made the things had to be there at the booth. And so you could actually, when you're coming to the fair, you'd actually talk to the artist that actually made whatever it was, whether it be stained glass or whether it be jewelry or whatever it was.
You
And
remember what the judges said about your sister's stained glass?
we got second place for the best booth at the fair that year.
I
So
can imagine.
yeah, and my sister had, gorgeous things because her artwork was amazing. And they had a shop at that point where they had a whole bunch of people she would do all the artwork, and then she'd have people that would cut the glass, and she'd have someone else that would I mean, she had a whole factory basically, but it was all her artwork, and it was all her designs. And the booth had to be totally in period. So you couldn't have like an aluminum ladder, or you couldn't have anything that wouldn't have been there during the Renaissance. Everything had to be something that would have been there, had to be wood or canvas or something that would have been there at that time period. And they were very strict. They'd come around and check out your booth and make sure that everything was in period and everything was just right. And that all your costumes were in period and that everything you did was in period. It was very, very, very strict at that time.
Who did your costume?
My mom made all our costumes for the booth at that time. So
Was she a seamstress of some sort, or was
she just sewed on the side. I mean, she wasn't really a seamstress, but she knew how to sew. And so it was pretty easy to make a Renaissance fair costume because they were, pretty basic if you were a craftsman, your costume was pretty basic, or if you were like royalty or something, they were very elaborate, but we weren't royalty. So all our costumes were not really that complicated to make. Um,
so what I'm gathering is that you were sort of the cute kid in the front of the booth encouraging people to come in and buy your sister's stained glass?
Yeah, I was selling prints of her pictures, and I was also selling little stained glass windows. Yeah, I was just helping with answering questions and talking to people and stuff like
Do
that.
you remember, and I know this is going back a bit, but do you remember what your sort of spiel was or your hawk?
No, it goes too far back. I don't remember exactly what my hawk was.
But did you enjoy talking to passerbys and enticing them into your sister's booth?
At that time I worked more inside the booth,
Oh,
so I
okay.
would just talk to people when they came in, and I'd answer questions, and like they might ask me how much the window was, or whatever they wanted, like who made it or whatever they wanted to know. I would just answer questions, and I had a lot of prints of her paintings, and I was more selling those and the little windows because a lot of people wanted to buy a $10, $15 window. They didn't want to buy a $500 window, although we did sell a few of the expensive ones, but it was more the little stuff that we were selling.
Do you have any memories of what it felt like the first couple of years you went out to fair that made it attractive to return over and over again?
Yes, you actually do. There was one day I was walking down the road and this Lord bumped into me and said, I cry you mercy. And he goes, I cry you mercy isn't good enough. We have to settle this with steel. And he pulled out a sword. And so I was with a fair maiden, and I said, would you hold my hat and my cape? And hands the fair maiden, and I pulled out my sword. And we started fencing in the street, back and forth, and a big crowd gathered around. It was really fun, and it encouraged me to take 2 years of fencing after that so I could be a little more successful in my bouts when I ran into people at the fair. And back in those days, you're allowed to do that. You just draw your sword and just go fencing in the streets. And Jay Paul had a skit at 4 o'clock on the main bridge where he would say, are there any Englishmen to defend the crown? And I'd come running up with about, 7 other people, and we're here. And the Spanish would all draw their swords, and we all draw our swords, and we start fencing up and down the creek. And it was just, it was a lot of fun. And that was back in the days when you could do that. And then someone got injured, and then now wasn't allowed to draw a sword anymore, and now that went away. But early on, you could do that, and people were allowed to ride their horses on the fair site, and that went away also because of the insurance problems. And then Roger Wilson, Roger was the guy that does the tug of war with the ropes. At nighttime, they have special shows for the fair people and events. They would have, like, a lot of the stage shows that happen during the day, they would do at night, but they would do them a little more risque and a little more different than things that they couldn't do or couldn't say during the day, they would say during the night show. So it was always fun to watch the show during the day and then see the night show version of it when they could do things that weren't allowed during the day. It was always a lot of fun. And the game that Roger was playing was called Clench a Wench, where he'd pick out 5 guys and he'd pick out 5 girls from the crowd. And the girls would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and the guys would be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. And then they'd put a girl in the middle, and the girl would call out an odd and an even number. And the idea is for the guy to kiss the girl in the center before the other girl kisses him. And it got pretty intense and very physical. It was a lot of fun. Everyone would be cheering on the guy or girl of their choice and rooting for them. It was a blast until someone got injured, and then that was the end of that, and they weren't allowed to do it anymore. But there was a lot of fun memories.
You had a slight detour in the children's glade. Did you work there?
For 1 year.
What was your job there? And did you learn sort of any fair skills while working at the children's glade?
That's a very good question. It's, again, it was a very long time ago. I don't remember. I don't think I had to go through. I mean, when you get into the acting department, it's a whole different conversation. But I think, if I remember correctly, the children's glade was still run like a booth.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, you didn't really have any, it was like they had arts and crafts and they had things for the kids to do. I think they had a petting zoo. I can't remember. But I remember they had things for the children to do. And what we did is we just provided entertainment for the kids while the parents would drop the kids off, and we keep them entertained until they came and picked them up with just things like arts and crafts and games and things like that. And we would just,
Did you do like little theatrical things, like let's have a little pageant or anything like that?
no, I don't remember doing anything like that. I remember it was more arts and crafts type stuff.
Did you sort of go to the children's dell out of default?
It was the first thing I found that I could get into after the stained glass booth was no longer available. I wanted to find something else I could do, and it was the first thing I stumbled on. So it got me a free pass into the fair and a night pass, and that's kind of what I was looking for. So I did that for a year.
And then you discovered the pirates and
Well, no, actually, I think I went into archery at that point.
oh, okay. Talk
I
to
was
me
an
about archery,
I was an archery instructor, and I would try to show drunk people how to not kill themselves with a
or
bow and
at
arrow.
least slap the bow against their inner arm, which hurt like crazy, by the way.
Yes, so I would show them how not to do that. If they followed my instruction, they wouldn't have that problem. And if they weren't too drunk, most of them listened. But, I had some that were way too drunk and really shouldn't be shooting anything like the bow and arrow. But it was one of the challenges of the job. They'd sell anybody arrows for $2, and it was up to us to make sure that no one got hurt with them. So we'd work the
Did you
line.
do the archery before you took fencing lessons or after fencing lessons or in conjunction with fencing lessons?
I studied archery when I was 7 years old.
Okay.
So I was a marksman at archery, way before I knew anything about the Renaissance Fair. And I was one of the top shooters at my camp when I was 13. I later went on to be a NCAA archery instructor, which is a whole
How
other
was
conversation.
the fair archery booth set up? I mean, how far did an arrow have to go to hit the hay bale?
Not far. And I used to bring my bow from home. So I had a really nice bow, which had a sight on it. And I'd use that and I'd bring that to the fair and got to shoot and show other people how to shoot with and show them not to hurt themselves when they're having fun with the bows and arrows. Then we did some hawking, trying to remember some of the lines we had to get people to come by, like, we talk about our shafts and things like that.
Sort of things that naturally lent themselves to a fair environment crowd.
When we got a good looking woman, we could have some fun with them and kind of show them how to shoot. Yeah, that was always a lot of fun.
Was there the obligatory tankard as a prize for hitting the target or something like that?
I don't remember any prizes for hitting the target. I think our main concern was just making sure everyone was safe and no one was getting hurt. But I did that for a few years, and after that, found myself becoming a pirate. And that's when I chose the pirate because back in that time period, the pirates were like the one loophole in the whole fair. And the reason why the pirates were the loophole is because back in the Elizabethan time, you had the peasants, which were poor people, had nothing. They're just, in the street. And then you had your royalty, and they were ones with all the money. But I didn't really want to be a royalty because that didn't really look fun. And I didn't want to really be a peasant either because that didn't look fun either. The loophole was the pirates because Francis Drake and all the pirates at the time would rob the Spanish galleons and they take all the gold and give it to the Queen of England. So the Queen of England loved the pirates because they gave her all the gold. And so they were basically exempt. So they can go and they could talk to the royalty, they could talk to the peasants, they could go here, anywhere they want to go, they could wear anything they want. They'd have to worry about, well, you can't wear this or you can't wear that or you can't. They pretty much get away with murder. So being a pirate was just fun because you had basically you can do anything you want. You don't have to worry about anything. You have to worry about having the sheriff come and so you can't wear this or you can't do this or you could do basically anything. It was a get out of jail free card. And at the time, there was no Pirates Guild. If you
Right.
didn't fall into one of these guilds and they didn't know where to put you, they threw you into St. Helena's. That was where they put everybody they didn't know where to put you. You had no place to go, you'd be in St. Helena's. So I found myself in St. Helena's Guild. When you work for the fair, it's a huge obligation because first of all, there's like I'm trying to remember what it was now. I think it was 6 weeks of fair, and then there was like 4 weeks of workshops. I think it was. And it was 10 weeks of every weekend, which is a lot of weekends. And the 4 weekends of workshops, you had to take Old English 1, Old English 2, improv, acting, Elizabethan history. You had to know how to talk, how to sing, you had to know how to act. All these things you had to know about the time period because you were back in the 1500s. And the genius of the whole thing that was Phyllis Patterson's vision was that she called it the Living History Center because every year would be a new year. So, if it was, let's say,
1978, it was 1570.
1978, it was 1578. So the next year would be 1579, and next year would be 1580. Every year was a different year, so that's why it was your living history. And so things would change every year too, because history would change, so things would change. And then they had costume department where they're like the Gestapo, and your costume had to be in period. And they'd come by and they first of all they check out your costume and it'd have to be checked off that your costume was cool. And then they walk around, they have the police, the Gestapo police, and if they saw you with sunglasses or a watch or anything that was out of period, you'd get hauled in and questioned and yelled at and don't you ever do this again type thing. So I was a photographer and I took a lot of pictures. That was like it was my thing at the fair was to take pictures. So I used to have to hide my camera under my cape, when I was walking around. And then when I wanted to get a picture, I'd have to look both ways, make sure no one was looking, pull out my camera, get the picture, and then shove it back under my cape because I couldn't be caught with a camera. It's totally out of period. I couldn't even be caught with a watch or anything.
Where did you like to hang out at fair to get good pictures? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't really have any Kodak picture moments, but I would just walk around the fair in character. And one thing you had to have is a character. So to work for the entertainment department, you had to have a name, you had to have a character, and you had to have what you were doing at fair. That was three things you had to have in order to work for the entertainment department. So I was Captain Aaron Sawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Aaron Sawyer IB was my character. I was at fair because we were on shore leave. So me and my crew were at fair on shore leave. That's why I was there. That's who I was. It was basically my character as a captain of a ship. I would just walk around trying to be in character and interact with the other characters as best I could.
Were
And it
you
was
basically trying to recruit them? Was that the sort of basic theme that you were walking
no,
around?
I was just acting in character. I was just acting like a pirate of a like a captain of a pirate ship,
Okay.
you know, and I was just walking around acting my character. And we'd have certain things that they would have us do, like there'd be a morning parade, a noon parade, hang out at certain places at certain times. We had certain things that we needed to be, but basically we could pretty much do anything we wanted to do. And we got a pass, and then we got a night pass where we could spend the night. And originally, back in the day, if you worked in the acting department, you would get food tickets. It was like $5 or $10 worth of food that you can go to any food booth and give them your food tickets and get food. And then some of the entertainers would get money. Well, that later turned out to be no food tickets, but you could spend the night there. Then it was like no pay, no food tickets, and then you could spend the night there. Then it turned out to be no food, no tickets, and you have to pay to spend the night there. So it kept getting less and less things that they gave you for working there. And basically, you're working there for free, but you're always allowed to spend the night after you paid the money to do so. It was still fun and we still had a blast. And but the quality of the entertainment did start to go down as the students came less, the quality of the entertainment went down, except for the people that were the old timers because they just loved the fair and they just wound up just doing it for free because they loved the fair.
I want to get back to the you taking pictures surreptitiously with a camera under your cape. What caught your eye, and as you were walking down the street, what were you looking for?
Sometimes you have to be there at the right second. I would want to catch that moment. And if you were just at the right place at the right time, one time there was a kid that had a lizard hanging from his nose. I just grabbed my camera, pulled it out, and bam, and I got this awesome picture of the. Then I have one of a fire eater that was the guy was, eating fire, and I got this awesome picture where the fire was right at his lips when I snapped it. Perfect picture. And I got some pictures of the mayor and the wife, which would be Jay Paul and Judy Corey. I got I got a really good picture of Lord Burleigh showing Lord Leicester how to eat with a fork. I have some great pictures of the Guildmaster, which, is no longer with us, but he was quite a character. He had this little finger stick that was like a hand on a stick, and he would know. And he's this old man, right? And he would
Right.
get behind the women, and he would know just how to lift the dress up and put it right in the right place, so they jump. They look around, they see him and smiling, and it was very cute, cute, dirty old man. And he worked it. He was great. He was one of my best customers. He bought a lot of my pictures.
You know, I started probably at the fair in the early 80s, and everybody talks about the cookie man or the guy
Yeah.
on the roof of the cookie booth.
So I have audio of him, and I don't have video because it was it was too early. But I do have audio of him, and I have, like I said, some of the best pictures that his wife said she's ever seen of him. I took Mike Levine.
Online, I have heard so many stories about the cookie man stopping traffic. There was just like 400 people just stopped looking up at the guy as he was haranguing people in the audience, kind of thing.
Don't sit there with your hand on your hips. Put a cookie between your lips. Juliet, how would he go? Romeo, Romeo. Oh, God, how did he was a cookie Shakespeare, he called it. He would talk in rhyme. He would go on and on and on and on and on, talking about cookies in rhyme and in the Renaissance character. It was truly amazing. And people would come just to see the cookie man. Phyllis, I mean, her thing was the queen. Phyllis Patterson, the queen was everything. But there were two people that upstaged the queen. And she used to hate that because There was two people that brought in that were just more popular than the queen herself. And one of them was the Cookie Man, and the other one would be Cock and Feathers. Cock and Feathers always drew like they'd be in the main stage and they would pack the place. Oh, and the other one that was pretty famous was Greg Dean, who was known as the obscene juggler. He was very, very funny. And Andy and Skip started the food, and Jonathan Cripple started, Andy Davis started the Foos Guild, which started as, all the pass the hat fools had to get in the guild. So they started the Fools Guild, which was just basically set up because everyone had to be in a guild. So that was the Guild of the Fools. And it later turned into parties, and it used to be pretty wild at one point. In the beginning, it was a lot of fun. Now today we still get together, 50 years later. We just had a party the other day. We're going to have a Halloween party coming up this year. It's going to be a really big Halloween party, but
Many fools have talked about fools guild parties. Let me ask you, what was if you have a favorite fools guild party that springs to mind?
one of my favorite was they were doing parties at the boys' camp in Griffith Park, and it's always a different theme. So one year, here they are in Griffith Park at boys' camp, right? You can imagine, and we had cabins that we were spending the night in and everything for New Year's, and the theme was a Titanic. So we all had to dress like we were on the Titanic. So I had a captain's hat and I had a double, breasted suit. And the party went on. And then at 12 o'clock, all of a sudden there was lightning and strobe lights and everything. And then the ship hit the iceberg. The iceberg came out of the wall at 12 o'clock. It was pretty amazing. I don't know
This
how
is
they did it, but they used to spend days setting these things up. I mean, it was a big thing that they did. Now it's not like it used to be because everyone's getting older, and it's
mhm.
not, but back in the day, they would put a lot of time and energy into these parties, and there would always entertainment, always, because you have all these people. It would basically, it was all the entertainment people from the fair, and you'd have Mackie. I don't know if you know Mackie. He's, and he would do a lot of stuff, and there was always really good entertainment. One year they did a Bollywood. It was called Bollywood, and it was like
Mhm.
an Indian theme. They must have had a table that must have been 20, 30 feet long of food, all Indian themed food. And then, they've done some amazing Halloween theme parties over the years. Some of them were really extravagant. Some of them weren't so great. Depends on every year there's a different king, and it depends on who the king was. So some of the kings were really into Halloween and some weren't. Roger Wilson was king. He did a whole pirate theme because he's not really a fool. He's a pirate. Sandy Grin was a king one year, and as you know, he really wasn't a fool. He was Sandy. I don't know. He was the Black Wizard. And Gary Morgan, he does every year he does a New Year's party. That's he has a castle. He lives in a castle, Hollywood Hills, and he has a huge New Year's party where they drop the ball at 12 o'clock. They're a lot of fun.
I'm going to switch focus here for a bit and ask you a different stream of questions.
Okay.
And it's sort of under the general heading of what life skills did you acquire at fair that you have used outside of fair? Or put it another way, have you ever been outside of fair and said to yourself, I've got this because I've done something like that close to this at fair?
I've always been, I mean, I'm a sales trainer. I've always been outgoing, and I did a workshop with a guy named T. Harv Eker, who does a workshop called Millionaire Mind. And one of the things we had to do is he broke us into three groups. And there was the procrastinators, the spenders, and the monks. And I'm a procrastinator, so I was in the procrastinator group. And we had to there's about 200 of us in the procrastinator group. And one of us had to go up on stage after we all talked about our traits. I'll do it. And everyone goes, he'll do it. He'll do it. No one would go. No one wanted to go. It's like, you kidding me? Be on stage with T.R. Becker in front of 1,200 people? I'm down. And I was the only one out of 200 people that wanted to do it. And I had no problem doing it. It was actually a blast being up there with T.R. Becker on stage. It was like, it was, I wish I had a picture. But I didn't really learn that from fair. I just always been like that. I have no fear at all of people and never did. When you say, what did I learn at fair that I guess the one thing I learned at fair was a lot of Elizabethan history and Old English, which, like I would have never known what a doxy was or a hobbledehoy or some of these
Hmm.
words that I picked up in, in old English class, I would never know about that purple is the queen's color or that things like that, that I just all the years of workshops and things that I picked up. Have I ever used any of that? And not really. I mean, did I learn anything that really helped me in life? Not really. But I
Well,
had a blast.
another thing, maybe this will disagree with me if this is wrong, but I found audiences at fair very forgiving, and that sort of gives you, or at least gave me, a sense of I could go out on stage or sell something and it was going to be okay, because my insight that I got at fair was that people basically want to be entertained. And if you're halfway decent, they will reward quite a bit.
I didn't really do any stage work. Um, I didn't really do a lot of improv. I basically just walked around in character. I interacted with a few people. I mean, I didn't really, the only thing I did is one night they had in the after hours, they did a gong show. And so they were getting people to go up there and do something. And I play the harmonica. So I went up stage and I did the Star Spangled Banner. And as I'm playing it, all of a sudden I'm looking out there and everyone was singing the Star Spangled Banner, which I wasn't ready for that. I was not expecting it. It really threw me for a loop. So I stopped and I kind of stumbled because I didn't know what to do. And then I just went and finished it. And that was one of the few things I did on stage at the fair. That's not really what I do.
Can I
Teaching
ask
people
what your day
archery.
job is?
Well, right now, I do a lot of different things. What I was doing until recently was I owned and operated a pizza sports bar restaurant.
Okay.
So I had, arcade games and a lot of teams come in, after the game and, we had 25 beers on draft and we had pizza and we had, it was about 150 seats. So I did that for about 15 years. And then after COVID and all that, now I've been repairing injuries. So I help people with injuries and I help people that have certain diseases like cancer and things like this,
Hmm.
holistic. So that's what I've been doing now, pretty much.
So getting back to your timeline at fair, how did your fair life evolve after you were walking around as a pirate captain?
After I stopped working for St. Helena's as a pirate, I wound up working with Mary Skier's Good Shepherd Games on the turtle race booth and some of her other booths.
For those of us not familiar with the turtle race booth, could you briefly, or take as long as you like, describe how one races turtles in a Renaissance fair?
Well, Mary had a bunch of booths. Turtle races is her was her main booth, but she also has crossbows and she has darts and she has oh, I can't remember. She's got about 6 or 7 different booths. But the turtle races was the first one, I think, and it was basically she puts the turtles out there, and the turtles have numbers on them, and they have to cross a finish line, and the first turtle to cross the finish line wins, and everyone bets on the turtles. So I used to help her with that, and I did the
How
photography for
does
her.
one help a turtle race?
Well, I'd help like the people that were working the various different booths. They need water, so I'd help run the water.
Oh, I see.
I would help, if someone didn't show up, I would go work that booth for her, whichever the booth was that someone didn't show up, she needed help at. If she needed anything, I was just there to help her, whatever she needed. And, we became very good friends. We're still friends to this day. When I do go to fair, I go see her and visit with her. But, thing I did was when the Renaissance Fair decided to leave St. Helena's and move to the Rancho Santa Fe Dam area, that was when I pretty much that was the last of my fair career because it was just the dam area. There was no nightlife, there was no night show. It really took all the fun out of it. Um, I remember that the boothies were all promised that, this was going to be their place and they were going to be there forever. And a lot of them put a lot of money in their booths. And when the fair took off and kind of left them, they had an investment that they just lost, and they were very upset. One of them had a pirate ship and sunk it in the bay. Yeah, a lot of people were very, very upset because they were encouraged to put a lot of money in their booths by the fair, and then the fair kind of turned on them and pulled out of there.
I want to go back and talk about something you mentioned earlier. Talk to me about being an undercover photographer at fair.
I mean, at first I was trying to make money. I started with that, and then when I realized that that wasn't really happening, I started just to try to capture moments. You'd see something that was just perfect, and you just bam, and you capture that moment. You know what I mean? You just had to be at the right place at the right time. And I try to get pictures of everybody. I try to get pictures of all the shows and the Queen's Parade and this, that, the other. And I did a lot of work for the Garland lady.
Hmm.
She wanted me to photograph her garlands. So I went around and found the best looking women I can at the fair, and I had them put on garlands and took pictures of them. So that was fun.
What other booths and or shows do you remember being either photogenic or just fun just to hang out and watch?
Well, my favorite was the Wizard Show. That was always fun. And Greg Dean was always fun. I like the jugglers, like the Fly By Night Juggling Company. There's a few of those that were fun to watch. Um, I mean, Mooney and Brune are always entertaining. They're still there today. Most of the
Oh,
Elizabethan stuff I really didn't care much for. Salami Show was really good
yes, it was.
back with Billy Scudder and Judy Corey. And when I had the original cast, I got some great pictures of that, by the way, too.
How about food booths?
My favorite food booth would probably be Steak on a Steak because the guy would be out there with the hat, steak on a steak. And I love the bangers. I used to love the banger booth. Banger in the morning for breakfast. That was always fun. Those are probably two of my favorite. And then I used to love Cuthbert's. So you go in there and it was the hometown buffet of the fair. You go in Cuthbert's and they give you a plate and you just for a couple bucks is all you could eat. It was amazing. But it was a blast. Before fair opened, where Manny used to do breakfast back in the day, and then other people took it over. I'm trying to remember who was doing it after Manny. And then there'd always be a dinner thing going on somewhere after hours. And then of course the Turkish coffee booth late at night was always a blast. There'd be belly dancing and people just go over there like at, 10, 11 o'clock at night and just, talk about the day and things that happened and stuff like that. And then one of my favorite things, change the subject, was Mark Lewis's stories. I love Mark Lewis. I really miss him a lot, but I do have some audio of his stories, which I promised I would never do anything with. But now that he's gone, I don't see any reason why I can't do something with him. But I have some great audio of his stories. I was one of the few people he let record him because he was always afraid someone would. He said, "I don't want anyone to share my stories before I share them with the world."
That
It's a
makes
shame that
sense.
he's no longer here to share them with the world. That's sad. I mean, he never really got the chance to really. He had so much talent, and it was just. But I have some of his stories.
Which sort of leads to my next question, which is as you look back, what things at fair gave you the most personal joy or satisfaction?
The thing I love about Fair, besides the women, I mean, it was a great place to meet women. But besides that, it was great that you could have a place you can go and you could be anybody you want to be for a day. You could pick your character and you could be that person. It's truly the ultimate escape from reality. And it was fun. I could be a pirate and it was okay, you're a pirate. I mean, where can you do that?
Do you have any memories of experiencing something at fair and then going, yeah, this is a good place for me to be right now?
I had a lot of fun experiences. God, how can I say this nicely? In my younger days, when I was in my early 20s, the Renaissance Fair was a place you can go and do things that you could not do in real life. It was a great place to meet women, and it was a wild, crazy place where you can pretty much, I mean, they had a kissing bridge, they had a kissing booth, they had some interesting parties at night. Looking back at it, hanging out with the Fools people, I mean, these are people that I've known since 1971, 72. Some of them. That's a long time. So, to be able to get together with these people after all these years, it's a very special thing because it's a lot of years to know somebody. And another thing is that every March, we go to the old site in Agura, and we used to go up to Procession Hill and read the names of the people that are no longer with us. We do prayers for those people, and they've sprinkled ashes of those people. It's an ancient Indian burial ground also, and a lot of our folks' ashes are also on top of that hill. And now the list has gotten so long because there's so many of us that are no longer with us that the last year or so they haven't been reading the list, which I missed that. But we also now meet in the foot of the fair. We used to meet at the Witches' Woods, and then we met at Procession Hill, and then we met at the Glade or the Queen's Glade, and now we all meet like in the Paramount Ranch, which is right there at the parking lot. Because some of us, like the last time I saw Jay Paul, which was about a year ago, I mean, he wouldn't have made it there by foot. I mean, a couple of us aren't able to walk that far anymore, unfortunately. But it's just great to see everybody again every year and do a prayer for the people that are no longer with us, and go back and reminisce the old site, and this is where this was and this is where that was, and just all the memories.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing those memories with us here today. I think that, at least to me, sounds like a good point to end this.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's there.
And that's my September 2024 interview with Marshall Bryer. I'm your host, Dan McLaughlin, and if you have comments for me to pass along to Marshall, you can email them to me at djng@earthlink.net. Questions about the podcast itself can also be directed to me at djng@earthlink.net. Finally, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on Fair Folk at Work, email me at djng@earthlink.net. But that's it for this time. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.